Big steps. The forest stretched out before us like an endless sea of towering trees and underbrush. My friends and I had embarked on a weekend hiking adventure, far away from the city's noise and chaos, seeking solace in the wilderness. Our destination was a remote and little visited trail in the heart of the Cascade Mountains, where untouched nature held its way. On the second day of our trek, as we ventured deeper into the woods, we encountered a trail that seemed less traveled than the one we'd been following on. The path was narrow, tangled with thick undergrowth, and it piqued our curiosity. We decided to abandon our original plan and follow this new winding trail that led us farther into the heart of the forest. The hours passed by in a blur of awe-inspiring scenery, and the soothing sounds of the forest continued. We hiked through dense groves of towering trees, crossing crystal-clear streams, and encountered a variety of wildlife. Everything from chipmunks to birds of prey, you name it. Our spirits were high, and the sense of adventure pushed us deeper into the woods. As the afternoon sun began to cast shadows behind the trees, we found ourselves in a particularly secluded and dense part of the forest. The narrow trail was overgrown, and the trees loomed like silent sentinels. It was then that I began to notice an unusual stillness in the woods. The birds had fallen silent, and a hush hung in the air. My friends shared my unease, and we exchanged knowing glances. We'd all heard the legends and tales of the wild, and the stories of cryptids that roamed these untamed lands. We'd chuckled at the campfire stories, dismissing them as mere folklore, but the sense of disquiet that had settled over us was undeniable. We continued down the trail with our senses on high alert. Then, in the distance, a figure, large and shaggy, moved through the underbrush. At first, I dismissed it as a bear or some other large animal, but the way it moved was different. It was upright, bipedal, and as soon as it emerged from the underbrush, we realized it was no ordinary creature. The sight of it made me want to go into immediate hiding. It was enormous, standing at least 8 feet tall, with a body covered in thick, dark hair. Its head turned slightly as it moved, and its eyes, which appeared to gleam with an otherworldly intelligence, locked onto us. The creature's presence was overwhelming, and its eyes seemed very fixed on us. The hikers in our group froze, unable to comprehend what was before us. The forest had given birth to a creature that defied all rationality. It moved with a grace, but it looked like a human and an animal. We remained rooted to the spot, our hearts pounding in our chests. The forest had become an otherworldly realm, and this cryptid was the keeper of its secrets. We watched as it moved further into the woods, disappearing from our view, but nobody would believe us on what we saw. With our nerves on edge, we debated on following this Bigfoot-like creature. We decided it'd be best not to pursue something that was much bigger than us, so we finally backed off and went the way we came. The legend of the Bigfoot-like creature in these woods became more than folklore that day. It became a chilling reality, and one that even I'm afraid to believe. The Northwest. In the heart of the dense, unforgiving wilderness, our small expedition team ventured into the vast, uncharted forest. The day was marked by the quiet as we ventured into the Pacific Northwest. We embarked on a journey to look for the Bigfoot, this giant mountain creature that people said was a massive, hairy behemoth and unlike any other creature. My crew and I had heard whispers and stories from indigenous people of the region about this creature, but we weren't prepared for what we would encounter later that night. We were skeptical, but we were also curious and determined. Our camp was set up in a small clearing, surrounded by towering trees. The advisors in our group were experienced wilderness experts, while the rest of us were seasoned explorers, believing we'd seen it all. As day turned into night, an unsettling feeling settled over the camp. Strange noises carried through thick underbrush, and we just all felt weird. My crew had heard them too, but who was I to tell them? I claimed it was just a wild boar, because that would be the most common occurrence in these woods. But the only thing is, there's no boar up there, and the advisors knew I was lying, but they didn't call my bluff. After dinner, they went to the tents, and I retired to my hammock about 50 yards from the camp. As a rule, I always set my hammock at my head height, about 6 feet up. This helps keep away creatures who may be able to reach me on the ground. I would use a tarp over my body and had to keep the morning dew off. Not only that, but mosquitoes would be incredibly bothersome, so it helped keep them at bay. But that night, the tarp wasn't strung up. It was just loosely over me. I convinced myself it was the unseasonably warm night, and I didn't want to feel trapped. It must have been around 3 or maybe 4 a.m. when I was awakened by what sounded like a woman sobbing. Not an outright cry, but a soft, mournful sob. At the same time, I could hear something walking through the thick brush down past my feet. I remained still, my breath held, as it crossed into the camp. I could hear the distinct transition from the rustling of brush to the cold, hard granite rock beneath. The heavy, labored footsteps continued to draw nearer, right towards me. I laid paralyzed with fear as the footsteps grew louder. The sobbing was now so close, and I could almost feel the presence of whatever it was. The tarp over my head kept me blind to what was happening around me, adding to the sense of scaredness. In no time, it was standing right next to me, and I could feel the immense presence hovering over my hammock. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to steady my breath, even though every instinct screamed at me to flee. The sobbing continued, and it felt as if time itself had come to a standstill. Out of nowhere, a large growl erupted from the being, and the ground beneath my hammock vibrated with immense power. I could smell its acrid, earthy scent, a mixture of wet moss and damp fur. It seemed as though the creature I was looking for, the Bigfoot, had found me, but its intentions remained a mystery. I dared not make a sound, hoping that by remaining perfectly still, it would lose interest and leave me alone. The long, agonizing minutes passed, but eventually the sobbing and growling subsided. The footsteps receded into the forest, leaving me trembling in the dark. I laid in my hammock, unable to sleep, and the rest of the night dragged on as the unknown creature continued to roam around the campsite. When first light broke, I cautiously peered out of my hammock. The camp was in disarray, and my fellow expedition members had gathered, their faces etched with fear and confusion. The advisors, who had heard the events of the night, finally acknowledged the truth we'd all known but were afraid to admit. The Bigfoot was real, and it was far more terrifying than any legend or story could convey. The Pinegrove. I'd chosen a secluded campsite in the heart of the vast and untamed Pinegrove forest. Nestled in a serene valley, my campsite offered a commanding view of the surrounding woods, a meandering trail leading to a serene creek, and the prospect of a peaceful night. One morning, the sun's first rays pierced through the thick forest canopy, and I decided to venture out for a hike. As I left my campsite at 6:45 a.m., I couldn't help but admire the breathtaking natural splendor that surrounded me. The campsite sat perched on a ridge, allowing me to graze across the verdant expanse below. However, my tranquil morning was disrupted by a sight I could hardly believe. From my elevated vantage point, about 200 feet away, I saw a creature that defied explanation. It seemed to materialize from the depths of the woods, its presence sending shivers down my spine. At first, my mind played tricks on me. I thought I was seeing a majestic deer, an elegant creature with a dark mane of hair. The creature's body was facing me, its head turned slightly to the left, but as I continued to watch in amazement, the figure before me defied any logical explanation. The creature's size grew with each passing moment, expanding from what I initially believed to be a young deer into a colossal, towering presence. The creature's movements were what truly set it apart. It wasn't a deer, and it certainly wasn't anything I'd seen in this forest. This enigmatic being, now standing between 7 to 8 feet tall, turned its head in uncanny precision, directing its gaze towards me. It then altered its course, moving eastward with a deliberate and unhurried pace. Its motion was captivating, walking on 2 legs, its back slightly forward, and its arms hanging naturally by its side. The creature made its way across the parking lot, heading for a bridge that spanned the nearby creek. I watched as the figure vanished into the thick underbrush on the other side of the creek. In the aftermath of this encounter, I felt compelled to search for evidence that would confirm what my eyes had just witnessed. I scoured the ground for any sign of footprints, hoping to validate the existence of this unearthly entity. Regrettably, the terrain was too hardened to yield any clue, and my efforts proved fruitless. I crossed the bridge and ventured north along the creek, my senses on high alert. My diligent search was met with silence, as the forest seemed to keep its secret locked away.